Okay, so I'll just move on to a couple of quick announcements before we get on to our feature presentation. So our next meeting we're still working on it. It's joint with the NorCal section, and they're actually the ones spearheading it. So it'll likely be in NorCal. They always meet at the ranch board of the city hall, but they might have a virtual option for us to attend. We'll send out those details once they get that settled. The next meeting is also actually a joint meeting with NorCal, but this time it's on our turf. We're hosting it at the Walnut Creek City Hall. It's Safe Streets for All with Colin Clark of CCTA. So eager to hear what that's about and see the Walnut Creek City Hall again. In December, we'll be having our annual kind of wrap up the year happy hour, likely somewhere in Oakland or San Francisco, somewhere like that. Perhaps the biggest thing is we've got upcoming elections for next year's officers. We do a calendar year officerships, so that's January through December of next year. Nominations are due tomorrow at 5 p.m. We are currently soliciting officers for president, vice president, treasurer, and secretary. Although traditionally people run for secretary and then move their way on up. And I won't say exactly how many nominations we've received, but I will say that if you are interested in the secretary position, it is currently it's a good race for you. So if you don't have any interest at all, please let me know. And there's a small application you have to fill out where you just basically say, hi, this is me, and get a couple of these members to sign off on you. So if that is all of interest, please let me know. And then Mr. Spencer, I don't know if we have anything from the Western District.
No, the next big event's coming up to look forward to. There'll be let's throw all into next year, a Student Leadership Summit will be held. Once again, it'll be hosted by Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. It'll be the 11th Student Leadership Summit, which started at Cal Poly and has spread actually internationally. So it's good to see it coming back on campus to Cal Poly. That'll be first week of February. And they're going to be looking for support and participation. So I know there's some Cal Poly grads in the room who might be hit up for some participation in that. I mean, regardless of which Cal Poly you may have gone to.
The real Cal Poly.
And next summer, so a ways off, but the next Western District annual meeting and exhibit will be in Sacramento next summer. So we're going to be having that literally in our backyard. So good opportunity and good conference participation to look forward to. And that's pretty much it on the district side.
Oh, perfect. And then, so I think with that, that's all of our announcements. Unless anyone else has anything they want to share with everyone, I'll go ahead and switch these presentations over to our guests. So, thank you for exit out of this.
Let's just sit behind the chair.
Wherever you're comfortable, I could have a clicker use for the slides. I should be able to headshot. I really have a lot of decisions. There we go. Sure. I guess my computer doesn't want to share it to the projector, but hey, you have this one.
I've not presented from this angle before.
You want to swap sides? Would it be easier to come over here and I can be over there? We can own this screen left and right.
Righty.
You can also move the screen.
That's getting very technical.
All right.
Yeah. It's gonna be union for that.
All right. So, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Phoebe Cheng, and with me my dear colleague Tom Moloney. Thank you for having us here to talk about BART's Earthquake Preparedness program. We do have a pretty robust program, so I'm excited to share that with you. Earthquake induces a lot of structural damage as shown on this slide over here. What you're seeing here are earthquakes that happened in California and recently, except the one in the middle that's in Turkey and just happened this year. You see the huge damage by 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake, and then 94 we have Northridge. 2014, South Napa, and just a few years ago, 2019, Ridgecrest, a magnitude 7.1. These are pretty large earthquakes, and not only it takes a huge toll on our infrastructures, also human lives and the economy. In the San Francisco Bay Area, we have a lot of seismic faults as demonstrated by these lilac, light purple stripes that you see. And that the red dots that on the map that you're seeing are the earthquakes over past 150 years with magnitude greater than 5. The little icon is blocking it. And the BART system is shown within that blue circle. And the major of the faults that really have a significant impact to BART are the San Andreas fault, which has the ability to have magnitude up to 8.3, Hayward fault up to 7, Calaveras and Conquer up to 6.7. It is, let me make this a pointer. How do you
Laser pointer?
laser pointer?
Is there an option?
That's okay then. Maybe I can just use my hand. That may be easier. Okay. So what you what was that? Okay. It is interesting to see that the Hayward fault runs parallel to our BART system, the Fremont line, and it also cuts across the Conquer line. So the earthquake that caused the most significant damage to the Bay Area was the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake that happened 30 years ago. It's a magnitude 6.9, and it caused a lot of damage, $6 billion, and in today's term, $14 billion. And unfortunately, took a huge toll on human lives. 63 people died, almost 4,000 were injured. And the earthquake happened, or I should say the epicenter of the earthquake was located about 15 miles south of BART system. And fortunately for us, BART system experienced minimum damage, and we were able to resume train service within 5 hours and full train service the following day. And that was very invaluable to the region. We were able to move people around, considering that the Bay Bridge was closed for the month. When it comes to our earthquake preparedness, so today's agenda, I'm going to give a quick intro of the BART system and then talk about how engineering and maintenance prepare for earthquake. And John will talk about first responders efforts. BART opened in 1972, so that's 50 years ago. We just have a 50-year celebration last year. Now we have 50 stations and are serving 5 counties, including having direct line to 2 airports, the Oakland and the San Francisco airport. The system has 131 miles of track, and about a quarter of it is underground, and a quarter of it is elevated at the aerials, and then half of it is underground. On the maintenance and engineering side, we have 4 major components for to prepare for earthquake. One is to make sure our system is robust enough so that it's through seismic design, and in this case, seismic retrofit. And number 2 is to have earthquake early detection tools and the procedures in place. And then after the earthquake, it's about being able to prioritize what infrastructure to inspect. We just have a lot of structures out there. And then finally, the last piece, it's about field inspection. For seismic retrofit, we have the earthquake safety program. So what you're seeing, the blue lines and the green lines, that illustrates the original BART system. And the original BART system was designed in the 1960s. Needless to say, the earthquake engineering understanding and seismic criteria is quite different back then. And after the Loma Prieta earthquake, it's evident that we need to strengthen our infrastructure and hence the earthquake safety program. And this program cost $1.5 billion. Most of the money, about $1 billion of it, came from Measure AA that allowed BART to issue the general obligation bonds to fund the program. So the program is complete. And so here are some examples of a structural retrofit that we did from this program. And one is the Transfade 2. You can see that we added the steel plates inside the tube and also adding pump stations. And that is to mitigate the potential risk of water intrusion should a really, really big earthquake hit. For the stations, we increase the capacity of the footing by having footing overlay. We strengthen the columns using FRP casing, and we add seat extensions to the cap beam so the girders will not just drop. And we also add in platform hold down blocks over here, and also of course bank cap retrofit. And similarly for aerials, for these elevated structure, we enlarge the footings. Well, not all of them. Some of the structures enlarge the footings, strengthen the columns, and the band cap and shear keys. So let's say an earthquake happens and the train is running. And our primary goal is to prevent derailment and to ensure passenger safety. And to do that, we have a very useful tool. We are using earthquake early warning system developed by USGS and its partners. And the tool is Shake Alert. And how Shake Alert works is that, let's say fault rupture occurs at the epicenter right here. And that once that occurs, two different kinds of waves will radiate from the epicenter. The P wave, that's the yellow curve you see, and also the S wave, the red curve that follows behind. P wave travels a lot faster, but it causes less damage, whereas S wave follows behind, and it's the one that shakes and causes all kinds of structural damage. So what happens is that the P wave will run ahead, and it would trigger the sensors, the seismic sensors that distributed throughout California. These sensors are spaced at 6 to 12 miles apart, and the sensors will pick up the seismic data and send it to Shake Alert Processing Center. And that the center then will determine the magnitude and the location of where that earthquake happened. And that information is sent to end users at the end of it. And BART is one of those end users. So we take that information and then we determine the selected locations in our system. And at such locations, what is the seismic intensity? If the intensity is greater than 4, then train is automatically slowed down or stopped. We adopted Shake Alert back in 2012. So BART is one of the earliest adopters of Shake Alert, and we provide feedback to USGS and was able to help with the development process to help it to become better. We upgraded to Shake Alert to 2.0 in 2018. And 2020, we obtained a license to operate. So now we're just like everyone else using that system. But since then, internally, BART has also a few projects going on right now to improve our response. To continuous improvement is a big thing at BART. So let's say that there is no Shake Alert alarm, but then somebody felt the earthquake and feel very strongly about it. They called and report the earthquake to BART. And in this case, our OCC Operation Control Center will slow down or stop the train and then contact USGS for the location and magnitude. If the magnitude is greater than 4, then track inspection will be done. If it's less than that, then train will resume its normal service. Another measure we have in place are seismic sensors, and they are distributed throughout the system. So if the sensors are triggered and it shows a peak ground acceleration of greater than 0.1 G, again, the trains will slow down or stop. So we have many different approaches to ensure to try to reach our goal to prevent derailment. So once earthquake happened, after it happened, what's important to us is to be able to assess the structures quickly and to be able to quickly and safely resume train service. And a tool that we use for that is called Shakecast. It is a fully automated tool to estimate structural damage. And Shakecast, again, is developed by USGS. And how Shakecast works is that minutes after the earthquake, USGS would develop this map, this color map that you see on the far left. And it's called Shake Map. And it indicates the location of the earthquake and the intensities throughout the region. That map then is used in BART's user database where we enter the locations of our structure and the fragility of that structure. Then Shakecast system will spit out a report that evaluates, that provides an initial estimate of each one of these structures and see if it's moderate damaged or, in terms of the level of damage is low or high. And based on that, that allows us to prioritize and send our inspectors out to selected locations. So we implemented Shakecast in 2018. So field inspection is done by both the engineering and maintenance team. In engineering, we inspect outside of right of way, and that a maintenance inspect from inside right of way perspective. So outside of right of way means that stations, or if we want to look at the aerial, it has to be from street level. And we divvy up the system into different zones. So right now we have 18 zones, and each zone is assigned to a team of inspectors with a team lead. And the way we do it is that, let's say an earthquake hits, and this is the flow chart, an earthquake hits, so Shakecast spit out the priority list, and then we check the earthquake to see if the magnitude is at least 6, and that the epicenter is less than 50 miles away from us. And if that is the case, then we will update the recorded message. There is an earthquake hotline, and then we activate our ERT emergency response team. And that is the engineering inspection team. We call that ERT. Then the inspectors themselves will call the hotline, listen to the instruction over there, and then they will grab their PPEs, personal protective equipment, and the inspector backpack. So the backpack has all the supplies that they need. Then they will go to their zone and then inspect as instructed in the manual. If the structures are determined, or if the structure is determined to be safe to run the train, then they move on to the next structure. But then every 90 minutes, they will contact their team lead just to make sure that they are in touch. And then if the structure is deemed to be unsafe, they immediately notify the team lead, and the team lead will notify EOC, that's Emergency Operations Center. So on the maintenance side, so they will be inspecting the structures from the track. They have the equipment. And the whole process is the same as engineering, except instead of reporting to engineering or reporting to engineering team lead, they will be reporting, the maintenance inspectors will be reporting to maintenance section managers. And the section managers will tell them what locations to inspect. And we have a list of priority locations. Transbay Tube is one of them. Berkeley Hills Tunnel is another. So this is how we at maintenance and engineering prepare for earthquakes. Now Tom is going to share with you first responders efforts.
Thank you. See if I manage not to mess with this technology. I've got it.
Oh, I got one
That's
more.
yours.
One more. All right. Another thing that we do is we have annual training for inspection. So just as a side note, all employees at BART are emergency disaster service workers. And for staff in maintenance engineering, we are also trained in ICS, Incident Command System. And every year we have in-class training where we go over the logistics for field inspection, the procedure, review the manual, and also go over the inspection backpack to make sure that the items in there are in working order. And in the field, we take our engineers to stations, tunnel portals, areas of parking structures. And then, of course, the maintenance people, they will go to those critical locations. So we do that every year.
So we're skipping into my work now, which is directly aligned with Phoebe's world. All of that wonderful engineering and all of that preparedness is kind of, it's tailoring where I go. My department is not engineering based, although I very much rely on some fire protection engineers, a great trade to get into. That is basically to say that we speak with fire departments. Our outreach goes beyond the walls of BART and in many ways integrates with BART. Our engineers can then embrace outside agencies. That's the agenda there, in a nutshell. So basically we have an approach to working with first responders that may in some way synchronize with the approaches that Phoebe's team implement, but it serves a bigger purpose, as I hope we'll see here. Regional response is something we think about, and it's something that we will speak to as we go through this. There's two parts of how BART will look at an emergency such as an earthquake. It will directly impact BART, obviously. That's why we take these steps that we've discussed here. And then we have to work around that and then maybe find ourselves in the driving seat of a logistical response to serve in a regional context later on. We do plan, we prepare, and we respond to major events. Moving masses in and out of areas is where the regional response logistically may well serve. And we've cited Loma Prieta. That was something where BART kind of shone, because as the Bay Bridge fell into difficulty that day, BART was able to keep moving. And after the appropriate inspections were made, it was handed off and brought back to life again after being shut down. And it served the Bay Area in that context. And we're very proud of that. And we're very proud of the Transbay too for being so well engineered and built to have been able to perform in that circumstance. So planning and preparedness from my prerogative is, again, looking outside of the bubble of BART. We work with the fire departments. So my ownership goes out to approximately 23 fire departments around. Because of who we are and where we are, it's just what it is. We have many, many jurisdictions. And each one of those agencies needs to be plugged into what the heck is going on at BART, because they come and work with us. And in this earthquake type scenario, they would certainly need to have some very strong background knowledge and capabilities. So we, along with BART Police, do training efforts with those fire departments to familiarize those with our system. That breaks down into a familiarization series of sessions that run through the year and based across that big map, where they will see the actual assets, the stations, the aerial structures, the tunnels. We bring them through and educate them as to how these work, the fire life safety elements that are built into those to make their job easier. Those things need to be communicated. It's kind of the back end of all the work that goes into engineering a good system. Online training is something we're very proud of in our little department, and that we've developed something now that it's a software program that we've developed with Haystacks, the owners of the said software. It's called CalCop. And it's in partnership with the Bay Area UASI. And through that, we're able to deposit an awful lot of really good information for first responders in the Cal OES system. So they can come and look at things that we were discussing, SSI implementations and all of our work, those of us in transit agencies, cities, you know, there's certain things that we can't just broadcast out there. This has found us a pathway to be able to communicate that to many, many agencies. And so we can bust out the plans, we can break down how this happens and get beyond the security concerns where we have to go in order to facilitate first responders in an event like an earthquake. So we're forward thinking on that, and CalCop has been a very powerful tool where all these agencies, frankly, all the way from San Diego, all the way up to Sacramento, could access this data now. And in a catastrophic event such as an earthquake, that might prove to be very beneficial indeed. We have exercises, lots of them. So when all you beautiful people are sleeping, we're running around in the wee hours of the night with all these fantastic people over here, fire departments, the civil response team down in Hayward. And we do big wet drills. That's what we call them, right? So we go into the tunnels And we exercise events that are going to correlate to the concerns we might have: fire drills, earthquake events, aerial drills, which we've seen some photographs of. These are critical because the hands-on approach to all of the implementations are going to be I'm personally someone who learns after the hands-on approach. You know, I know how to do it. I feel good about it after I've done the thing. And that's what we offer with these exercises. And these are on a constant rotation. We do a minimum of 4 a year. And I can tell you hand on heart, we very much exceed on that. This is something every transit agency does do, but it's something that has grown to be a lot more, I would say, robust, based on what the steps that we've taken with the communications explored in the last slide. So we have familiarization, we have exercises. Part of what my department does then is planning preparedness efforts. So we're keeping an eye on the system in the day-to-day operations of BART. We perform a series of inspections, much like a building inspection or fire inspection effort would be done on buildings such as this. And in order to do that, or as we do that, we can find deficiencies in the emergency equipment that I've expressed to you lives within those assets out there. So we have a deficiency, for example, with a wet standpipe in the tunnel. Something's gone loose and it's leaking, et cetera, et cetera. We can address that before we do have a major incident down there and stay on top of it. So in implementing that, that exceeds on our maintenance and PM efforts. All of this stuff, of course, is maintained. But we have an extra set of eyes on it with this approach, and it's something then that can be communicated back to our first responder agencies, whether they be in fire or police, to let them know that all this stuff is where it needs to be when they need those tools. The data collection component of this is really something we're developing data streams based on events, not only in our findings on those inspections, but we're looking at the world around us. And a great example that I think most of us in the Bay Area can speak to is, you know, we have a lot of unhoused people living adjacent to right-of-ways out there, and they create a lot of problems in terms of, you know, fire problems and potentially vandalism. So we're keeping an eye on that, and we're tracking all of that as best we can. That allows us to have strong communications with our partners in terms of cities and counties as to how we might mitigate these things, because it's part of life now. It's not going away. Response and recovery. We've mentioned OCC to you today. Some of you may be familiar with the Operations Control Center. That is over by Lake Merritt BART Station. It's underground. It's wonderfully spooky looking like that. Back in 1970 something, it was the latest, greatest, highest, techest thing ever, you know. It is getting renovated right now, and we're going to make it even better. But that's the brain of BART, for those of you who just may not have heard about it before. And that's where all the operations are controlled out of in terms of train control movement, et cetera, et cetera. That will tie in directly with the Emergency Operations Center. As that controls the BART system, the Emergency Operations Center would be in the chain of command that we see here today, that we're discussing in an earthquake today. We also have an Emergency Operations Center that is BART's. We have that in the same facility. It's just literally across the hall from our Operations Control Center. And that would have a direct hotline back to, for example, the City of Oakland. We have over at Station 1, we have a seat over there, and we stay engaged with those folks. If something like an earthquake happens, we're plugging right in with those people, Alameda County, et cetera, et cetera. Our Chief of Police has ownership of this and is staffing it out right now. We're going to be recruiting a new emergency manager very soon that will help us with this. We lost one recently, which was a shame, but we'll build that out again. Response and recovery. So this is where I see the two components of the work we do. In the event of an earthquake, let's say some of the data that Phoebe's team brings back in, is negative. We have a structure that's been damaged out there, and potentially that affects passenger movement on BART. Well, first responders are going to go and address that. They're going to rescue the individuals, get them out of there, bring them to safety again. So that's the first leg where these folks will implement and where we will, you know, form a partnership with them. It's driving in that direction at that point. As the data is analyzed, that Phoebe's team is bringing back to the EOC and communicating to the personnel in there, of which I will be one, we'll be able to say, okay, in BART speak, we have M line, OR line, and W line all satisfactory for operating in service. We have issues, for example, with the C line, et cetera, et cetera. I'm just throwing those out there. And with that, we can then take that assessment forward and fall into the regional response that I offered at the beginning of my spiel here, which is to say that if the city and county of needs something brought in there and the freeways have been jeopardized, think back to the Bay Bridge being in trouble and us being able to function underneath the bay, same scenario again would lend itself to where I'm going with this. We can then take our trains, and so long as we have power, and we're prioritized in terms of how that's staged out by our friends at PG&E, we can then operate. It's as simple as that. If our assets are still good, we can come in, we can bring in personnel, first responders, military response. For that matter, we can bring in water, food, basic necessities. We can also go the other way and assist with the evacuation from, let's say, North Berkeley. We have people assembled there from the hills, even in a hill fire scenario, but an earthquake would be very correct. And we could take them out of there and get them out of the hot zone and help in the relief of that situation there. So it's kind of two parts of this in terms of how first responders work with us. The immediate fire departments of San Francisco, Oakland, and the other 21 of them, they're going to be coming in at the first end of it. It will scale up according to ICS practices and NIMS and SIMS and all of that good stuff. And then the regional response will kick in. At which point then we'll be operating with Task Force 3, for example, here in Doolittle, and we'll go to work with them. So that's to give you a snapshot of how that might work. There's two parts of the first responder element of this. And this is really to give you a sense of how we see it working. We have the emergency management components, and they're kind of gathered around a circle, and there is an interaction here. I probably shouldn't have touched that. We've mentioned to you the assets that would be hard at work in terms of managing this event here. And then we have the personnel that Phoebe and I have expressed to you will be serving into that. So we have our Emergency Operations Center and our Operating Control Center. And quite simply, they're going to be manifesting the management thereof. EOC will probably take the lead, and the operations of BART as is established will be run through OCC. And then external agencies could go anywhere. It depends on the scale of the event. That's something with an earthquake we have to be very clear on. It could go in all kinds of directions. We're going to have some big people coming in to assist with the Bay Area in the event of a very big earthquake. The emergency response and recovery will be local agencies that will scale up to bringing in external agencies, and all of that will be routed back through EOC and OCC. And none of that happens without the engineers telling us that we've got some track and train to run out there and giving us a heads up as to the health of the system and what we've got. So that is it ties into her world and all the people she works with. My people are mostly external agents. I work with folks outside of BART, and I bring them back in to tie this together. And hopefully that will make some sense to you as to BART's emergency response logics. Any questions?
With emergency services, if an incident occurred on a freeway, it's usually the local agency is responding. If something's happening in a BART facility, let's say in the tunnel under the bay, how do you determine who is going to be the primary responder to that incident?
Great question. Jurisdiction stands, and it's all held together. A great example with the tunnels, which is where that goes. There's kind of a line drawn in the sand down there, and we have a tunnel. Let's look at the more famous of the two, the Transbay Tube here, reaching from Oakland to San Francisco. And it's understood between Oakland Fire Department and San Francisco Fire Department, the two agencies who would be directly involved and be the first ones on the ground out there, whereby we have a midpoint. It's as simple as that.
Okay.
And when we get to that halfway point, which we can measure not only with the milepost reference that in the civil context we operate with at BART, but we also have a simple implementation which helps folks like me and the fire departments, which is the doors, the emergency egress doors through the tunnel structure itself that lead into the safe chamber, the lower gallery in that structure. They're individually numbered. And there's a command post on either side of these structures whereby the command, the white hat in the fire department will set up, and they have full print sets there to work with.
A sort of follow-up, is there special equipment that these agencies have to respond to an incident in the Transbay tunnel?
And per se, no. They go with fire department equipment, and that's it. Their breathing apparatus is standard issue. We have some elements that we introduce to assist in their endeavor there, which is to say at the lower gallery, and I should express that it was in one of the graphics here, but it's a small walkable chamber that runs between the train bores themselves,
Right.
just so we're clear on that. With that particular tunnel, that's in the design.
So are they
And so they have
walking?
some carts there. We
Oh,
implement
carts.
some little electric carts so they can get through it a lot quicker because it's substantially long at 3.7 miles. So they can come in from the command on either side, set up, do recon, those kind of things. That's how they use it when we drill and exercise. That's what I see them develop as SOPs down there. And they can get to the incident site first, put eyes on, make an assessment, radio that back up. We have a vast array of communications equipment, which is as old as BART and me, 1972, and copper, and it's still real down there. We maintain all of that. So if the radios go sideways, we've got that to fall back on. And we've implemented also something that some of y'all may be familiar with, mine phones, because they work really well in really terrible environments like mines. It's pretty dusty down there, and it's not a great place to go walking about if you're in your Sunday best. You know, it's a tough environment, lots of brake dust. It's underwater. It's kind of like being on the moon in a weird way. And to that effect, we have the mine phones, which exist down there because of this unique environment to communicate en masse. They are PA system, and they're tough, so they can take the environment they're in. If you put the PA system that operates potentially in this building down there, you could probably get a week or two out of them. It's gone. So it's an interesting place to do the work, but in terms of equipment specifically, they tend to operate with what they've got. Extremely a deep dive into the structures and the stuff we're talking about today. The communication is so important for them there.
So
may I just inject one last item to that? If in an earthquake we have an event down there, that's when things will scale up with the fire department. And I'd be foolish to even try to talk to you about the kind of equipment they keep in their warehouses. They have task force people around California have got profound equipment, and it's way more than you might typically see in a city rig that would be implemented there. Sorry.
So if there was an earthquake and then you're going from everyone stand still at the earthquake to the next day, like the Loma Prieta earthquake, next day everything's back up and running. Kind of what steps are taken between those two goals in terms of like inspections and, you know, do people walk the tracks? You know, how does that go to ensure that you can safely operate?
That is that inspection team. So we inspected from the street level, and we inspect the stations, and along the track we have maintenance staff on the high rail vehicles, and they will they go, in addition, let's say they go to the critical locations first, and then of course they're going to go through the whole system. Yeah. And if there are issues from track alignment, you can tell.
How often do the local fire departments do training exercises in the system?
Great question. We work with them on a committee level, and it's something that we take their needs under consideration on a committee. So quarterly, we will meet with the fire chiefs around the bay. They will come in, and it's also typical to do it on Teams these days, and much easier for them when we consider the geography. But that we will do that, and as we go there, we will take stock of what their needs are. So at the last quarter of the year, we will look to the next year and say, okay, what does your chief want in terms of big exercises? Do you want to hit the tunnel? Do you want to go out and do aerials? Do you want to do, you know, mass casualty events involving multiple agencies, the big stuff? At least we can chart that out because of the planning that's required for that. Familiarization, more local stuff, if you will, where we're walking and educating as to what this car is, the ISO ratings, and, you know, how third rail power can affect their response, those kind of things. We can do that on the flip. So we will always take stock of their needs first. And on occasion, we will prescribe training for them. We will tell them when we suspect they need to know something about our system. But ultimately, we will let them come to us via their training chiefs and their chief's authority to initiate all of that. But it's constantly moving because of the turnover in fire departments. One can only imagine the numbers through all these agencies. We're always trying to meet that, you know. I can give you a sense of, numerically speaking, last year we did a snapshot in one of our little data streams, and I think we achieved about 700 firefighter training sessions, as in individuals, not sessions. But we covered 700 firefighters across multiple agencies in the space of that 1 year period, and that was for familiarization. Certainly.
Sounds like the trans bay tube is like really structurally sound. It's from Moloney and everything. But that one aside, what is like what are, I guess, the higher risk structures? Is it the tunnels or is it elevated structures for like in terms of earthquake preparedness?
Transfer tube is retrofitted to a higher level of earthquake. So when the criteria back then, so in early 2000, transfer tube was retrofitted for a 1,000-year event, whereas the rest of the structure is 500-year event. And so aerial, the area of the green lines that you saw previously represents a higher level of performance compared to the blue lines because of our budget constraints. And in transfer tube is, even though it's 1,000-year event, it's also retrofitted for performance of so-called operability performance, which means that when such a large earthquake hits and it's the train or the structure will experience minor damage and will be able to resume service very quickly. And another, the lower level or retrofit is called life safety. And what that means is that when a huge earthquake hits, and let's say those aerials, and a 500-year event hit, and it is designed such that it will not collapse, and people will be able to evacuate safely. However, it will have some damage, and that it will require a lot of time to repair.
I think it's fair to say the tunnel structures are probably the ones we think about more. I'm not going to say they worry us more, but we think about them a lot. And one of them being underwater has immediate potential for bad news, although it's done well. And then we have the tunnel that runs, as we know, the Berkeley Hills tunnel. It runs through the mountain, so to speak. And it's a very different creature. It's a very different approach to that in terms of the work that we do on our side of things. It has to be handled completely differently because of its very design, the engineering that went into it 60, 70 years ago. It's got more constraints and more limitations and a completely different ventilation system. But the aerials would then maybe be in the 500-year event, they're going to be a concern too. By its very nature, BART is built in an interesting location, and it's got a lot of probably the toughest challenges you could have. Underground, burial, those are pretty big headaches when you have an earthquake.
So I have a question. So when you're training these fire departments who, to be familiar, you have something unique in the fact that you have extremely high voltage running through your structures. Like you mentioned, you train 700 people. Are they allowed to go into the system if they haven't had that training, or is that part of, I don't know, do they, like you have, rail workers protection, it's like, are they, is that part of the program is to make sure that all those firefighters are trained so they can enter your system? Is my guess.
It is. It's a great question. And when they come on board in their agencies, we have an outreach to them that's constant in terms of, I've mentioned the Cal OES software implementation. That's kind of new, but since the late 70s, we've had a document that we manage, which is very creatively titled the BART Fire Manual. And that book is laden with information on BART from the engineering prerogative and from the simple matter of facts of BART. And it covers a lot of processes that they should adhere to when they go in there. That's in the training divisions of all these fire departments. And we update that accordingly when we have an extension or a change in a station. So that communication is constant. That's part of it. And we do actually go and work with their training divisions, again, at their bequest. We're not kicking on the door for anyone here, but if they want us to come in, we're getting a flash and we'll sit and talk with the firefighters that are the probies, the new recruits. And we'll talk to them about any old thing. When they come into the field, the last piece of my babble on that is we will bring them down. We will bring them down and do some of that familiarization work with them and show them the things that their chiefs know are going to be the tougher parts of our system to work with. And in an earthquake scenario, that's usually going to be focused on underground stuff. It really is, because that's where the pinch point might be in that horrible event. So we spend a lot of time in that regard, just reaching in as they come into the system or the service of fire departments. And then we will come and engage with them as need be to blow the dust off and keep it fresh with them, because they have a lot of things they have to remember.
Any other questions?
Tom, how did you get into this business?
I once upon a time worked for a utility company that starts with P and ends with E.
Yeah.
So I was very comfortable with the utility world and big electricity and stuff. And I'd been poking on BART's door for a long time. About 15 years ago, they opened that door and let me in. And I went into the track world. I went into the system proper and worked in the maintenance groups and worked out there, learning the system and high rating and operating equipment on it, which was a powerful education for me. From that, I went into regulatory stuff, the training that goes behind our railway protections out there as mandated by the state of California. So I got my arms around that, and I worked with that for a number of years and drifted into our safety group, where I became the point person for fire departments. And in the last couple of years, our GM decided we would take the extra step and create a fire life safety division specific, which is simply me and one other gentleman and a team of consultant engineers who I couldn't do it without, to be quite honest with you. Fire protection engineers are absolute gold for the plan reviews and all the things we need to qualify. And that's how I got here. I kind of stumbled into it, but it was by happy circumstance that BART decided to embrace this departmental logic, if you will, and create this. I think WMATA might have something like this, and I think the logic of that for our agencies might be because of the multi-jurisdictional challenge. If I'm in a city with a particular system, and then I have a particular fire department to work with, things are easily managed there, relatively speaking. But when you get into a system that has so many, kind of that beautiful map with all the little spider legs going out there and so many cities on it, that's a big obligation. And so I think my GM has been very forward leaning with that, kind of pushed us in a good direction with that. The feedback we're getting is good, I will say that, all the way up to the state, so that's a win. Miss? Okay.
I guess you mentioned there was a line right along the fault. Is there any additional considerations you have around that? And also, if there is plans to extend the BART lines, do you also consider fault lines into that?
The one that cuts through the sea line, the Concord line that you're talking about. So that is at Berkeley Hills Tunnel. And we do have an issue over there. We were to retrofit it, I think at that time, the cost estimate, or to do something about that, the cost estimate is, I don't know how many billion. It's like $1 billion, and we just didn't have the budget to do it. So every year, the fault slips and there's fault creep. And we have had projects to take care of that. And for instance, we installed this kind of wire mesh on top, so the debris from the creek fall onto the train and cause safety issues. And that's temporary solution. And right now we also have a upcoming project that we know that we don't have the money to completely solve the problem. But let's say there is another earthquake hits, and then we have the fault rupture occurs a certain amount, let's say 6 inches or 10 inches, that has safety issues, right? The train cannot go through it because it needs to have certain clearance. So right now we have a project going on is to determine what kind of emergency repair that we must have planned, and also materials and equipments that we need to set aside for this kind of event. But if like a really, really big one, and it completely cause our track to be really off, then that is a big problem. Then what we need to do is to have partnership with surrounding perhaps AC Transit to allow us to have bus bridges that can move people around that blockage.
So we have good mutual aid partners all around us in the Bay here. I mean, I'd be remiss to tell you we didn't use them at least once a week in some scenario or another. And when an earthquake does strike the Bay Area, I think that's going to be proven to be gold, because someone somewhere amongst all of us is going to have a challenge, and we're going to have to help one another. That's just the nature of it.
With the USGS shake alert system, how much time in advance of the S wave arrival is the P wave triggering the sensors?
it depends on how far the epicenter is. So I don't remember. I think that the Loma Prieta, for instance, like Loma Prieta, I think, okay, I don't want to give you the wrong number, but what I can tell you is that the further the earthquake is away, the more time that we will have because of the speed difference between the two waves. And that we need, I think, 10 or 20 seconds for train to go from full speed, 70 miles per hour, to stop. So having that time that you're talking about is critical.
That's huge because that window of time, albeit small in our worlds, as Phoebe has said, I mean, we shouldn't overlook that. If that vehicle is moving with potentially 2,000 people on it, that's a crush load. In the old days, we had that before the pandemic. Okay. But that's being able to stop that thing in time changes everything, because that train hurtling along into something that we have no control over is something that it's a very dark thought. Being able to stop it, that prevention there is huge. It means the work, the people I work with will be a lot less when we get there then.
So we're talking about seconds, not minutes, between the two waves.
Yes.
What is there in place to make sure that in the event of an earthquake, you can keep the emergency operations center running as well, and to be able to communicate still between people on the ground and people making things happen in the office?
That's a tricky question. It depends on where the earthquake hits, right? If it hits under Lake Merritt, we're probably going to lose that fight. But so long as it's within, we have, in terms of communication, that facility it's equipped with like the goods. It's got everything, up to satellite phones and all the way down. So we're not dependent on one media form or another. And we can operate in there, just as I know the city of Oakland. We've got a friend here from Oakland that's I've been at their EOC many times, and Alameda County. They're equipped with a certain criteria of equipment that should not fail. There's backup power in the facility, and there's kitchen equipment there so people can go to long haul. But in terms of communication, it's got a lot of stuff. A lot. I could list it all before.
I have another question. So you mentioned that you have just the OCC. Does BART have a plan to do a backup OCC? Ramada has one.
I can speak to BART having the idea of that, and it's going to be contingent on funding. We have a location, we have a spot that we've been looking at that would make sense for us, but I'm not going to lie, it's going to come down to money. And if we can secure funding for that, I know our leadership, our team will go there. It's all mapped out, so to speak, but it's going to come into where the heck do we get the money from, because building an operational control center is it's not cheap. But yes, we do have a plan for that. We're currently remodeling the one we have, and that's even in that effort. The engineering and design of what's happening there now will lend us a lot that we can take towards that hopefully future project. And if we can secure funding for that, we will go there. It's a great idea, and I think we realize that we need to find capital for it. That's what it's going to be.
I think in the transportation profession, we can all relate to that. Any final questions?
Okay.
Well,
Well, thank you all very much. We didn't bore them too much.
thank you both for being here. Really great presentation. I think by the number of questions, you can tell we had some great engagement. Of course, everyone, we still have plenty of chips and salsa. And like I said, use chips for the salsa instead of forks. Help yourself, and yeah, thank you, everyone.